Well, this is off the truck, but this is below the top of that. And, okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second day of the Electoral Boundaries Commission hearings in Edmonton. I usually have a lengthy introduction. I think I'm going to shorten it a little bit because the chairs don't need to hear me, and I think the people that are going to be presenting know full well what the process is like. But I do want to introduce our commission. First of all, and just to remind you that we are an independent body, independent commission established by the legislature of Alberta, and I'm Justice Dallas Miller. I'm privileged to be the chairman of the commission, and I serve in a capacity as a trial judge normally in my normal day job. The other commissioners to my immediate left is Susan Sampson, a longtime resident of Sylvan Lake, an experienced municipal politician who had served 2 terms as mayor, and she has been recognized for her extensive volunteer experience by way of receiving Citizen of the Year Award for Sylvan Lake and a recipient of Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Medal. Next to Susan is Mr. John Evans, a lawyer with a province-wide practice of litigation, known as with a firm known with the name of Stringham. He works predominantly out of their Lethbridge office, and he conducts trials across the province. His legal ability has been recognized by receiving the King's Counsel Award, or KC designation, and he volunteers on the Alberta Judicial Nominating Committee as well. Right next to me, to my right, is Dr. Julian Martin, a retired history professor from the University of Alberta. Julian volunteers on many committees in the Sherwood Park area where he lives, and has served on provincial tribunals such as the Surface Rights Board and the Land Compensation Board. At the end of the table, Mr. Greg Clark, an entrepreneur and consultant in the area of information and knowledge management. Greg also is the recipient of the Queen Elizabeth Platinum Jubilee Medal for his volunteer service in the community. Greg has served 1 term as an MLA representing Calgary Elbow, so his experience on the commission is very valued. He consults widely with organizations in the area of proper governance. We are your Electoral Boundaries Commission, and for a more fulsome description of everyone's bios, you can certainly go to our website and read more about us. There's a couple of things that have been put on our agenda as an Electoral Boundaries Commission. First of all, the legislature has passed a law expanding the size of the Legislative Assembly from 87 seats to 89. So that's a task we have to ensure is taken care of, adding 2 seats. Whether that's enough, we don't know, but we will make some recommendations in that regard. We have a timeline on which we have to follow. First of all, the commission was announced by the Speaker in late March, and the clock starts ticking at that point. And that means that we have a certain limited months to do what has now come to be known as an interim report. So an interim report must be filed with the Speaker of the Legislature by late October. But before we get there, we met as a commission a couple of occasions in April, and then we planned out the public hearing schedule, which started last week and will end on June 23rd. And we take all that input and the guidance of the legislation, along with the input, leads us to develop the interim report, which we will file with the Speaker in October. It will be public. It will be printed in the Alberta Gazette. And then that brings us to a second round. And then the public and people like that are presenting today will have something substantive to chew on and respond to the commission and give us feedback in that regard. Then, 12 months after our appointment, we are obligated to file a final report, and then members of the legislature will deal with that and determine what use that report will be, if it'll be adopted in the 89 ridings as we recommend, or the legislature is free to make changes. And of course, each member of the electoral district has one member of the Legislative Assembly. And I will often use electoral district, but riding or constituency is more vernacular terminology. The second big component in the task before us is, after increasing the seat count from 87 to 89, is dealing with the significant population growth that this province has experienced. If we go back to the 2017 Electoral Boundaries Commission, that commission based its report on a population of just over 1 million people, just slightly over, and I'll give you the exact figure in the next slide. Our situation is such that we're relying on the data from the 2021 Canadian Census, which is regularly updated. So we don't want to use just 2021 numbers. So we're using numbers that have been validated and verified up until July of 2024. So the precise number that the EBC from 2017 used was the 4,062,609 population. And when that is divided by 87 seats, the mean average is 46,697. The target population range for effective representation is that range that you see in the slide, 35,023 to 58,371. Now we go to the task before this commission. The population figure that we are using, and I want to make this clear that 4,888,723 figure is the figure that's frozen as of July 2024. As I said, the Act requires us to look at the most recent census, which is 2021, and from the Act also gives us flexibility to rely on other Alberta-based data. And so we have been advised by the Office of Information and Statistics of the Alberta Treasury Board that a safe number that can be verified as of last July is that figure there. So when we do the math, the average is 54,929, and the range, as you can see, varies from 41 to almost 69,000. Now, of course, the population growth is not spread evenly across the province, and that's part of our task right now as we go through the public hearings. We're hearing from communities across the province in terms of growth in their areas. The task of our commission is not to come up with a plan based on a one-person, one-vote formula. That is an American-based formula. Canada doesn't operate on that, and Alberta and other provinces have operated on the principle of effective representation. And effective representation, to a large extent, is determined by the legislative criteria and by the case law going back several years. The factors that we're going to be considering is the relative population density and sparsity, common community interests and organizations. And yesterday, we heard a lot about community organizations, community leagues in Edmonton. It was an eye-opener for us as a commission, that's for sure. We received lots of helpful information from presenters yesterday in that category. To some extent, in the cities, we're concerned about geographical features, and we can take that into account, but more importantly, that's a factor that operates in the more rural context outside of Edmonton and Calgary. Communication lines and transportation routes is also a factor in the legislation that we can consider. And our task is to make sure that we have understandable and clear boundaries. And that's where you as presenters, I'm sure, will provide us with assistance and input. Finally, there's a catch-all phrase in the legislation that allows us to take into consideration other appropriate factors in coming up with our recommendation. So we now move to the point in time where we want to hear from you as presenters. That gives you a bit of a thumbnail sketch as to how we got here. how we advertise and publicized the meetings. And now, today and in the weeks ahead, we want to hear from Albertans. My understanding is that the first presenter isn't here, the first scheduled presenter, but David Shepherd is here. So David, would you come forward? And as you probably saw in the material that you were provided with, there's a bit of a time limit on presentations, 7 minutes, but I've been known to be flexible in that area and let people go on a little further, especially when we're not banked up with presenters. So, Mr. Shepherd, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are speaking from, what electoral district.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I am David Shepherd, and I have the honor of having served for the last 10 years as the MLA for Edmonton City Centre. And I've been a resident of the constituency since about 2008. So, no problem with the clock. Given my position, I'm used to making timed remarks on the floor of the legislature. But I appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you today, and thank you for giving your time for this service on behalf of Alberta. I'd like to start out by sharing a little bit about what makes Edmonton City Centre unique. As you're probably aware, the population of Edmonton City Centre as of the 2021 census was about 48,685, so above that provincial average that you had noted there. And that's in part because our neighborhoods have a very high level of density, about 10,570 inhabitants per square kilometer. So that makes Wequentuin, my own home neighborhood, one of the densest neighborhoods in Edmonton, and the western half of the community is the densest in Alberta. So at the same time, we have a very low level of single-family housing, about 98% of our residents living in condo, apartment towers, or walk-ups, and that's a general trend across city centre. In 4 of the 7 communities in it, more than 90% of the residences are in condos and apartments. We only have 2 communities that have a more than 50% living in single-family homes. So you may hear from rural representatives about the challenges they face with how spread out their communities are. We have a unique challenge for representatives in Edmonton City Centre, and that is very difficult for any prospective candidate, or once you're the representative, to contact a lot of the people who live in the constituency, simply because you cannot knock on their doors outside of an election period. So it creates a bit of a unique situation. With the exception of one community, we're above the city average for couples with no children, ranging from about 48% to 76% of residents. And since 2017, we've seen significant new residential development. We've got hundreds of new units that have gone up in residential towers in downtown and Wequentuin. Strong growth in multiplex infilling Queen Mary Park, Spruce Avenue, and Westwood. So we've added a lot of new residents to our constituency. And across our communities, we have a strong representation from racialized communities, primarily of African and Asian descent. We have a strong population of seniors, with Wequentuin being above the city average, having a number of seniors residences. We have a wide representation of incomes, ranging from individuals who rely on very limited social support programs to high-end professionals. And there's certainly diversity in our communities, but there's also a strong consistency in terms of their needs and their interests. So I'd say our communities share a common interest in safety and vibrancy in our communities, maintaining local access to services and amenities, a strong, vibrant local economy, and ensuring a strong system of public services to ensure we're supporting everyone that's part of our communities. And a large number of our residents have also made a deliberate choice to live centrally, to facilitate easier access to services, transit, things like the River Valley, our arts district, also to reduce the need to commute. That's why I'm here. I loathe traffic. Affordability in housing is also a big issue for a lot of folks that choose to live in some of the communities that are here. So given all of that, and considering the growth in population and the density, it would be my recommendation that the current boundaries of Edmonton City Centre be kept intact. I think it's essential that we look at when we're looking at adjusting our boundaries, we maintain a map that is fair for all communities. And I think with the growth in our constituency's population over the last 8 years, the increasing pace of residential growth in our communities, because it is continuing to grow at a steady rate, already some of the densest in the city, I'd suggest it might not be a good balance to add additional neighborhoods, residents, and further dilute representation. Similarly, I think the most effective and fair electoral map is one that groups communities of like interests and needs together. As I've noted, the communities within our current boundaries, while we, again, are home to a diversity of residents, hold a lot of interests and needs in common. We have a hard boundary, I'd suggest, both physically and in terms of our demographics, with the river to the south, Yellowhead to the north, and our current western and eastern boundaries follow the contours of the existing community. I think it's also important that racialized communities who hold common interests in terms of their needs and interests in representation are supported to be able to exercise their vote effectively. And the communities currently represented in our boundaries are inclusive of some not insignificant communities, as I noted, of African and Asian descent. So again, it would be my strong recommendation that we keep the boundaries of Edmonton City Centre intact. And to facilitate that, I'd make a few suggestions, I guess, regarding your consideration of the boundaries of some of the other constituencies in and around Edmonton. Of course, as we adjust one, there's the ripple effect that affects others. And I do recognize, as you noted, there's been some significant growth in Edmonton's population over the last 2 years, with most significant growth, as I understand, in the south of the city. I understand there's some conversation around potentially taking some of those most suburban communities, connecting them with other towns, cities, or communities on the periphery of our city. Personally, I would argue against that. It's my concern that if we start fracturing our city boundaries, we're not only going to compromise the commonality of interest within those constituencies, creating more work for their representatives and potentially weakening their representation, but that doing so could create a ripple effect that would affect constituencies like Edmonton City Centre by creating inward pressure in the adjustment of boundaries and the weighting of the population. Much as the communities in my constituency have more common interests and needs than those outside our core and those in the suburbs, those communities in turn, I think, have more common interests and needs together than those outside our city boundaries. Particularly, I'd note that because of the current boundaries of my constituency, because they're inclusive of a lot of like communities, it's empowered me to build some very effective relationships with local municipal representatives. That's allowed for some very strong advocacy on issues that frankly require close collaboration across orders of government, something that's a lot more difficult to achieve if we begin to combine Edmonton communities with those from other municipal jurisdictions. I think those municipalities around Edmonton, they have their own needs. They have their challenges. They have their own cultures. Their infrastructure needs. They in Edmonton can often be asking the province for two different outcomes on the same issues. Things like land annexation, infrastructure projects, etc. So I think it makes more sense to look at how we can link towns of similar sizes together, Beaumont, Leduc, and Devon, for example, or as we've seen with Spruce Grove and Stony Plain. So in summary then, it's my suggestion that I think we could best reflect the significant population growth in Edmonton, best serve the needs and interests of the effective representation democracy by keeping Edmonton City Centre relatively intact to what it is now, and looking at perhaps of the two new constituencies, then creating one here in Edmonton, perhaps where the growth is happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. I'm sure there's going to be some questions from the Commission, but I want to clarify something at the outset. I thought I heard you cite some statistics at the beginning. Can you just repeat what you said?
Oh, certainly. Just in regards to the density?
Yes, yeah.
Certainly. So, yeah, the current level of density, at least as of the last census, we were looking at about 10,570 inhabitants per square kilometer in the neighborhood of Wequentin. That's the densest community in Edmonton,
okay,
and the western half densest in Alberta.
Okay, I thought you talked about an increase. And so what I want to make clear is, according to the data we have, the 2017 Commission had a population for this electoral district of 47,715.
Yes.
Okay, and then moving forward, the 2024 figures that I talked about puts you at 60,544.
Okay.
So that's the number.
Thank you.
We have
those are numbers that I have beyond what I had.
Yeah. So
significant growth.
Yeah, and so that puts you clearly in the target zone, but on the higher end.
Yes.
And so I just wanted to make sure we were
thank you.
understanding where we were coming. Okay. So questions? Greg, any questions?
Yeah, exactly. And building on that, where you've mentioned the tall towers, and obviously, as Justice Miller's indicated, we've got you about, I want to say 10% over roughly our target of 54,300, give or take. One, what do you anticipate the growth to be? As I look at the graph, it looks like it's grown, reasonably significantly, since the last commission. I think actually that's interesting. So I'm looking at the growth of Edmonton City Centre, and it in essence has been approximately 10% above all the way along. Do you feel like it's about to? Are people moving in? Are people moving out? Or are there a lot of big empty spaces that are going to become tall towers with hundreds of people in them? Or how would you characterize the growth is for the first
I would characterize that we are expecting to see significant continued growth. So there are a number of new towers that are under construction. There is conversation around a further conversion of office towers to residential. There is a significant push, I think, from all stakeholders in the community for more residents in our downtown. That's how we create safety. That's how we're going to create more local economic vibrancy. I know the City of Edmonton, as part of their CRL, is, I think, looking at how they can incentivize further residential. I would add to that, we are looking at redevelopment plans in the Rossdale area that may lead to further residents there. And within the neighborhoods where there are more single-family housing, as I noted, we are seeing quite a bit, especially with the new, more open zoning bylaws in Edmonton. A lot of single-family homes are being replaced with, duplexes, fourplexes, eightplexes. So I would say yes, we're on track for, I think, significantly continued growth.
Okay, and so at worst, you're likely to see a continuation of roughly the past trend.
At least.
At least. So you're not feeling like it's hollowing out.
No.
It's more likely that you actually would see, if some of the policies you talked about on the municipal level sort of land,
Yes.
you're ending up seeing a little bit more growth. So if we were to should we create a little headroom for that growth within the Edmonton City Centre, or do you feel like it's likely the next 7-10 years is going to be roughly tracking the past 7?
I find the constituency as it stands as local representative is manageable. So certainly, I mean, with continued growth, I guess I would ask you to weight that against what you're seeing in other parts. So I think if we keep relatively consistent ratios, to what we have now, I think that's reasonable. If you wanted to consider, I guess, creating more headroom and sort of shrinking the boundaries, I mean, in 2017 commission, they did add 2 neighborhoods, Westwood and Spruce Avenue, sort of on the north end of the constituency. So there is the opportunity, I suppose, to connect, one of those 2 neighborhoods, perhaps Westwood at the northernmost. If you were looking to create that headroom, that might be the opportunity to connect that then with perhaps with Edmonton, Glenora, or one of the other adjoining. But it's tricky because, again, like I said, we've got the Yellowhead right there. That's a hard boundary on the north.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Good. Okay. Julie?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. I'm very interested in your remarks about the housing stock. As you may or may not recall, I am on the Board of Governors of MacEwan University. So obviously, housing for students is a perennial issue. And I wanted to ask if you felt that in your writing that we are replacing older apartment stock with newer, upgraded stock. There's very little unoccupied building pods except right next to the river.
Right.
So if you anticipate more growth, as I think you rightly should, how's it going to happen? Because the conversion of offices into apartments has been a perennial conversation for a generation. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's been slow moving. Yeah. So what I would suggest is we still have quite a few surface level parking lots in downtown. And so those are, I think, primary locations where we expect to see further expansion of housing. Certainly, we know that just to the east of Rogers Place and moving north from Ice District, there are plans there, and that is within the CRL as well. I think provide some incentives for a significant injection of housing on that site. So there is still a reasonable amount of vacant land within the downtown core. But you are correct. I think in Quentin and some of the other areas where there's less of that, we are seeing 3-4 story walk-ups being taken down and replaced with larger towers. So there's that growth there.
All right. Thank you.
Susan, question?
Thank you. My question was answered earlier, so thank you. But what I am pleased to see or hear and understand from you is that there is expected continued growth in your riding. And that's important because we often see downtown communities hollowed out, and that is not the case here. But I do believe, Mr. Shepherd, that we will, because the growth has continued and has proven to be so, we will possibly look at those 2 north communities of Westwood and Spruce View, and certainly contemplate taking them off to get the numbers down, because honestly, the next time a commission meets will be 8 years from now, and
Yeah.
things will have changed significantly.
It's true.
Thank you very much for your time today. I enjoyed that.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Scott, any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Shepherd, the takeaway from what you're saying, first of all, would you mind providing a copy of your submission?
Certainly, no
I'm
problem.
most interested in the single-family dwelling.
Yeah, absolutely,
statistics.
some of those
Yeah.
statistics.
Yeah, so, but the takeaway, is it fair to say that the takeaway you want us to have is keep the boundaries?
Mm-hmm.
You recognize that other boundaries in the city have to be changed because of strong population growth. But if we have to take away a little bit, it's Westwood and Sprucefield.
Yes, Spruce.
And were those communities given to Edmonton City Centre in 2017?
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay,
they were
good.
taken from Edmonton, what was Edmonton Calder.
Good. Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for a very clear and concise presentation.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Spruce,
We appreciate that people are flexible, and I know you may have been given a time. Well, we're right on time for Hans Smith. Mr. Smith, you're scheduled for 9:50, and we've worked out the schedule to perfectly fit you in.
Well, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present this morning. I'm a resident of Edmonton, Highlands, Norwood, so it's right next to Mr. Shepherd's riding of Edmonton Centre. And, without repeating a lot of things that Mr. Shepherd said, I would say I agree, particularly with the latter part of his presentation on retention of borders. So my presentation today is really to focus on Edmonton, Highlands, and Norwood as a very unique riding in Edmonton and indeed in the province. So I've been living in the riding since about 1977 and have always voted in every provincial election since then. So I identify really strongly with, not just as a citizen of the province and the city of Edmonton, but this particular neighborhood and which is part of Edmonton, Highlands, Norwood. So I'm advocating today to retain and honor the boundaries of Highlands, Norwood as presently constituted for several reasons. First of all, geographically, Highlands, Norwood is unique and interesting in that it borders the North Saskatchewan River on the south and encompasses a good part of what we now consider the inner city of Edmonton, butting Beverly to the east and 97th Street to the west, and includes some newer neighborhoods to the north. Highlands, Norwood has a long history as part of Edmonton. For example, I live in Virginia Park, and the house in which I reside was partly built in 1930. Much of the housing in other parts of the riding date back to the early 1900s. There are many public schools that date back in time, such as Norwood, Virginia Park, Highlands, Crestwood, St. Clair, to name only a few. That means that several generations have grown up in Highlands, Norwood. Many who descended from graduates of the schools still called Highlands, Norwood home, or at least identify with the neighborhood in which they grew up. I grew up just north of railway yards in Calder, which offered employment to many people who lived in that area. Socially and culturally, the riding is very diverse in terms of occupations, social and economic status, ethnicity, and other forms of identification. You might say that Highlands Norwood, as a unique part of Edmonton, has welcomed immigrants from around the world. In the earlier 20th century, from European countries such as Italy and Portugal, and it still has a presence in the riding, as you might know. In more recent history, from Asia and Africa. And we have a large population in the riding of people from indigenous origins as well. Economically, while much of our riding falls on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale, and there is poverty and homelessness, and other issues that beset inner city neighborhoods, there's also much to celebrate and hope for. Neighborhoods in Highlands Norwood, such as Alberta Avenue, Macaulay, are experiencing a renaissance with new housing and businesses and a rising sense of hope and pride. There are annual festivals which draw people from across the city. Beautiful parks such as Borden Park now also host festivals such as last week's Ukrainian Festival and in the summer Heritage Days and K-Days. And along beautiful Ada Boulevard, we take pride in the expanding Concordia University. All of this is to say that Highlands Norwood is a collection of neighborhoods providing homes to a diverse and thriving population with ongoing urban renewal based on a strong identity that deserves to be represented provincially in our legislature. Democracy is more robust when people feel connected to a sense of stable place and collective representatives who understand and can articulate the needs and aspirations of the people in the riding. Given that Highlands Norwood already has the requisite population required for equitable redistribution, we see no need for altering its existing boundaries. So I just want to add that unlike perhaps Edmonton Centre, I would say the majority of housing is still single-family housing, ranging all the way from, as I said, early 1900s to wartime housing to more, affluent housing in neighborhoods in the older neighborhoods like Highlands, Norwood. So population growth there will likely not occur in terms of the kinds of high-rises we see in Edmonton Centre. However, with changes in zoning laws, we are starting to see already increase attempts at density by more duplexes and triplexes and so on. For example, in Highlands, I know many lots are large properties. They're 60-foot lots by 150, and already we see quite a few replacement of those single-family houses with housing that can hold multiple residents. The other unknown factor, really, in terms of possible population increase, is the future of the exhibition land. So right now, those lands are sitting empty. It's been announced that where the Oilers used to play is going to be demolished, and there are plans to build housing in that area, starting around Borden Park. But that seems to be like a long-term project, and I'm not sure how much housing will be built in that area, say in the next 8 years before the next hearing. So really, I think I'm not sure exact population is right now. I think we're around 50,000. So I think we're kind of in that range that you're looking at in terms of an equitable distribution.
Well, actually, the numbers we're looking at is well over 54, almost 55,000. Okay. 54.
Okay, I didn't have the latest numbers.
You're almost bang on the average. So
I don't see where population could be increasing in terms of the current riding, other than possibilities of expansion into the exhibition lands, which are currently part of our riding. So thank you.
Well, thank you. If you can just stay there for questions. Mr. Evans, any questions?
Yes. So I took down a note. Thank you for your presentation, but I took down a note that you mentioned at the very beginning that there's something unique and interesting about the Edmonton Highlands Norwood electoral district. And so I wanted to know, in turning to the legislation, if there's any sort of unique or interesting or identifiable community interests or community groups within this electoral district that you could identify for me.
Sure.
And then maybe fill me in on some of the background with respect to
that. Well, I think you're a very strong community league. I'm not sure if any of our community leagues will be presented here. For example, I'm a member of Bellevue Community League. Virginia Park is part of that. A very active community league, Highlands Community League. And then the folks that live in Alberta Avenue have done tremendous work over the past few years trying to revive that area, through, for example, they have an annual winter festival, Kaleido, and there's a summer festival. And it's starting to address you know, some of the, admittedly negative features of, you know, I'm not sugarcoating it, there are real challenges in the riding economically in terms of housing, for example. You have large houseless population in that area. The fentanyl crisis, of course, hits our neighborhood hard. But you know, what's hopeful is that there are really dedicated groups of people in that area who are really trying to build up those communities.
So it's just, is Bellevue and Highlands community, are they within this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Susan?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I'm interested, since we've come to Edmonton, we've heard a lot of discussion on community leagues. And I do believe, I'll check back with you when I'm done, but I do believe the community league strength in Edmonton is unique to this city. And that is a critical component to keeping the boundaries together, because of the work they do on a volunteer basis is a lot of heavy lifting. So I'm glad that you focused and brought that again to our attention. And when we talk about the exhibition lands for an area for growth, I agree with you that that is the unknown, but it certainly may not happen in the time that we're at. And because you were sitting at 54,768, my gosh, we've got 87 ridings to look at. If there's some that are perfect, in my opinion is to leave them alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Julie, any questions, comments?
Yes, thank you for your presentation, and I was particularly taken by your remark about the new city bylaw changes that encourage densification by allowing you to move from single residence with the classic bungalows in the area to densify those. And I rather suspect you're going to see growth in population because of that, rather than from developing the exhibition, the old exhibition grounds. That land's too expensive. It's got too much weird stuff under the dirt, and it'll take a long time to build out, I suspect. So I take your point that you will see some growth, but it's going to be on the pre-existing residential footprint, which is grand, I think. But you also suggested that there's a very distinctive character. You've lived there virtually all your life, and so I want to be mischievous. You know, as the present boundary to the east stops at, what is it, 50th?
Yes.
And so it doesn't go on further to the east. But it seems to me, and am I right, that those neighborhoods that are currently in Beverly have exactly the same character as the ones to the west side of 50th Street. Is my impression correct? I'm not suggesting that, you know, we push them all into your writing. I want to understand the character of how this whole area developed.
Right. I mean, so, as you go east of 50th Street, it's very similar kind of neighborhoods. But further east from there is more density. Starting around 34th Street.
Yeah.
There are like multiple row housing units, and there's been recently some new rental, not high rises, but 8-story units built along near the Yellowhead. You know, so that makes it a bit more distinct from our neighborhood, where we just haven't seen that kind of that former densification.
Right. Well, thank you.
Greg? Yeah, I don't really have much to add. I mean, I think one of the interesting, unique aspects of this job is all 87 and now 89 of our constituencies they're like our children. We love them all equally. Some of them, however,
we're a problem child.
or may just happen to fit very nicely within a particular population. Well, we'll just let that. We'll let the numbers take us where they will take us. Anyway, just more thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate it very much.
Mr. Smith, you'll be pleased to know that yesterday you had another cheerleader from Highland.
Okay.
That basically meant the same thing. And one of the side effects of hearing all this as a non-Edmontonian, I want to come visit some of these ridings when this is all over. This Alberta Street sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
But I just want to ask a bit of a historic question because of your long nature and connection with the constituency. In the 2017 commission, did they change your boundaries at all?
I don't know that. Sure.
No. Okay.
So
it doesn't stand out.
No.
Okay.
Doesn't stand out.
Okay. So if they haven't, then this is really historic.
I don't think they have. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your insight and your presentation.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Okay, that takes us to 10 o'clock. Priya Usman? Thank you. And please identify yourself and correct me if I mispronounced your name.
No, you got it right.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Priya Usman. I am a 19-year-old university student. I was born and raised here in Edmonton, Amiskuchi, Wisconsin, and I've attended school here my whole life. I remember in grade 6 social studies, we learned about democracy. From the ancient Greeks to the Haudenosaunee Confederacy to our proud Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we were taught the value of strong democratic. It was those powerful values of democracy that were instilled at me at a young age. My time in the Alberta education system has made me a proud citizen of our democratic society, a society I hope that continues to display these values for the next generation of students and children. In my own childhood, I spent a lot of time driving around Alberta. Whether it was for a dance competition, my brother's soccer, or simply a family trip through our beautiful province, I was able to experience many corners of this province I call home. From Alberta Beach to Valley View to Lethbridge, I was able to appreciate the uniqueness of the many different communities in Alberta. It is because of these experiences that I'm here before you today. Albertans in every corner of this province deserve a strong democracy. Both Albertans living in a major city or a small community deserve fair and proper representation. Both Albertans, I'm an Edmontonian. I love my city. In order for me, my friends, my family, my students, my colleagues, and my community to have access to democracy and fair representation, it is absolutely essential that the electoral boundaries of the new constituencies respect city limits. While we share common values and a vision for a strong province, the needs of Edmontonians in the city are not those of Albertans living in Sturgeon County or even Strathcona County. And it goes both ways. My friend living in Beaumont does not have the same needs as someone living in Summerside in the south side of Edmonton. My friend living in Parkland County does not have the same needs as someone living in Aldergrove, 5 minutes away from West Edmonton Mall. My friends and their communities shouldn't have to compete against major cities in order to be recognized, seen, and heard by potential elected representatives. They don't deserve that, and neither do the Albertans living in Edmonton or other major metropolitan areas. No one deserves to have the needs, the voices, and the concerns of their community dismissed, diluted, or diminished because of a map, especially a poorly drawn map that disadvantages Albertans across the province. And this issue goes beyond major municipalities and their surrounding areas. We are all treaty people, and Indigenous peoples living in rural Alberta on reserves deserve to be represented and have their voices heard in the legislature. Ainsi, les francophones de l'Alberta méritent la représentation. Additionally, Francophone Albertans deserve representation. Each of these communities, every single Albertan, we all deserve fair and democratic representation. It would not be reasonable for an elected representative to juggle the unique needs of so many diverse communities, both within and outside city limits. MLAs already have a lot of complex roles and responsibilities. Why make their job any more challenging than it already is? Albertans deserve to have an elected official who can accurately represent them, their family, their friends, and their community. Albertans deserve to have an elected representative who doesn't have to choose whether they will prioritize and advocate for the needs of their urban constituents or their rural constituents. We don't deserve a sprawled out, messy, pinwheeled electoral map that helps no one and renders our representative democracy inefficient. It is crucial that the electoral boundaries map is drawn in a fair, just, and democratic way. And this means first and foremost, respecting city limit boundaries. In conclusion, as an Albertan inspired by my education and experiences in the beautifully diverse corners of this province, I am proud to sit before you today to uphold and partake in our democracy. I urge the Commission to respect city limits when redrawing the electoral boundaries. This will allow for the promotion of fair, equitable, and democratic representation in our province. This will ensure we maintain a strong representative democracy for future elections and future generations. Thank you. Hi, merci.
Thank you, Priya. Any questions or comments? That's for you, Greg.
Just briefly, first off, thank you very much for your presentation and joining us. In addition, as Justice Miller said, the great privilege and pleasure of traveling the province and just seeing all sorts of different places, but also hearing from a wide range and broad diversity of people with different views, perspectives, ages, educational backgrounds. It's just a real privilege. So thank you very much for sharing your perspective on that. As an Edmontonian, I guess I'm curious, and I'm not unfortunately an Edmontonian. So are there just curious what your constituency is, and is there anything specific you wanted to share about that constituency, any particular communities of interest, or if there are other communities within Edmonton you feel like important that they are together, and maybe talk about why that would be?
So I live in Edmonton Decor, which is in the north of Edmonton, and I guess that I would say, reiterating my main points of my presentation, is that I would like to stay within Edmonton. I don't want to be pulled out into Morinville, St. Albert, Fort Saskatchewan, Sturgeon County. I'm an Edmontonian, and while I love visiting other corners of this province near to Edmonton and around the province, I'm not interested in having my constituency outside of Edmonton.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, although I do hope that you leave us a copy of your presentation. We might use it as a preamble or something. Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions, comments?
Yeah. Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I'm interested in something that I would like you to expand upon, and that is you are the first Indigenous person to present to us.
I'm not Indigenous.
You're not?
No.
Okay, well then my question is not a good one. Sorry for that mistake.
That's okay.
But thank you for the presentation. It was most informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
John?
Morning. You mentioned that you talked about the differences between the rural and the urban, and use an example of Beaumont, for example, or just most recently you referenced St. Albert. Could you, and I appreciate that I might be putting you on the spot, could you give me 3 differences that come to your mind that would distinguish what you're considering an Edmontonian urban riding versus the rural, say, Beaumont or St. Albert?
Okay, I can try and touch on the Beaumont one specifically because I have a friend who lives in Beaumont and we've discussed this. What I would say is that, for example, my friend in Beaumont, she would have to drive like an hour every day to come to school because we went to school together. And if she had to access a lot of like services for school or university or for personal matters, that was just to go, you know, a significant distance compared to, for example, someone like me who lives in Edmonton Decor, and it's like a 10-minute drive to go to the doctor's office for me, which I recognize as a privilege. It's, again, like a 10-minute drive to go to the grocery store where I can get groceries for me and my family. So I think those are some differences. And yeah, that's on the top of my head what I can speak to.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. And I echo one of my colleagues' comments. You can leave a copy of your presentation. And I'm curious, are you studying these days? Are you in university?
Yes, I am in university.
What are you taking?
I'm taking political science and sociology at Campus Saint Jean.
Great. I'm sure Alberta will see more of you.
I think so.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Great undergrad choice. Okay. 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 We are just only slightly behind time. Our next presenter is Ms. Sarah Hoffman. Good morning.
Morning, Justice Miller. And I think Priya is studying pre-Prime Minister, probably. So.
Pardon me?
Priya might say she's in poli-sci, but I think it's pre-Prime Minister.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here to present today. I don't have a script, but I have some key points that I want to touch on with each of you and have an opportunity to have a bit of a dialogue. I'll start by talking about my experience living in this province. It's been my home my whole life. I grew up in small town rural Alberta, a number of different communities, Altario, Castor, and Canuso, all communities of 1,000 or fewer. And then I moved to Edmonton for university, and Edmonton's become my home. After university, I worked at the university, and I also eventually ran for the Edmonton Public School Board. So I brought maps of where the schools are within Edmonton Public and Edmonton Catholic as a bit of a guide, because the first time I went through electoral boundaries as an elected official was when I was on the Edmonton Public School Board. And there was a proposal at that time to consider...
Sorry, can I interrupt you? And I just did. So tell me what riding you represent.
Oh, Edmonton Glenora, where we are right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the east side of Edmonton Glenora, yeah. Maybe I'll take this moment to back up a little bit and say that growing up mostly in Canuso, in the middle of Lester Slave Lake constituency, I knew our Representative Pearl Callahason quite well because she was able to attend events in the riding on a somewhat regular basis. And when she'd run into me at the Save on Food near my home, she'd ask me the last time I was home to visit my parents and if I needed a ride home next Thursday because she was driving home on constituency break. I think one of the advantages of having like communities together are that you get to know your representative in a meaningful way because you have consistent events and relationships and demographics. And I found the same thing when I moved to Edmonton. Some of the issues I'd advocate for when meeting with Pearl were mostly around emergency preparedness. It seemed like every 3 or 4 years we had a flood that prevented buses from getting to the school. So either making sure that we addressed flood mitigation or found other routes to be able to ensure that my classmates who lived outside of town could get to school was a priority. Some of the things that I advocate for now as an urban MLA are quite different. Overcrowding of schools would be one of the key issues that we're dealing with. So I did bring these maps here to be able to talk a little bit about electoral boundaries as they relate to other elected representatives, specifically school divisions. And I didn't draw on the boundary maps, but the key thing that I wanted us to reflect on with these maps is the way that families engage in their community is often with the school as the hub. And the school as the hub when your children are young is usually in your neighborhood, within, a 10 to 15-minute walk of your neighborhood if you choose the neighborhood school, which more than half of Edmontonians in Edmonton Public do choose their neighborhood school. Even with programs of choice, which I'm very proud of having here in Edmonton, there are schools that feed in. There's a natural pattern of how people move from elementary school to junior high to high school. And typically, there's a goal with choice programs to have them in the same geographic quadrant of the city. So one of the benefits is that you have the same trustee, whether your child is in elementary, junior high, or high school, if they're in a Spanish bilingual program, for example. And at one point, we did discuss when we were redoing the boundaries for Edmonton Public, potentially cutting it into a wagon wheel so that everyone would have some of the suburbs and everyone would have some of the core. And we decided against that, and I want to give you some of the key reasons why. One of the big ones was being able to develop and maintain long-lasting relationships with people in the same sector of the city and being able to make our decisions with the values of the electorate top of mind, so that I wasn't pitting the priorities around building new schools outside of the Henday against the priorities of maintaining schools in the core of the city. I could focus on the folks that I was there to represent who had generally comparable, consistent priorities. And people who represented other areas could also keep that voice consolidated and intact. And we very, very rarely have anyone who lives outside of the city attending schools in the city. It's partially now because our schools are so full, but also because people choose the school as a hub. Crossing those boundaries is not something that happens on a regular basis. And also with the fact that schools are so full, we just don't have the space to accommodate people who live out of division. So that's partially why I wanted to bring these. And I know that for Calgary Public, it's the same. Calgary Public Schools are only within the bounds of the city of Calgary, and that their electoral map also is only within the bounds of the city of Calgary. Calgary Catholic's different. They've reached out into the suburbs. So there are some pressures there when it comes to their board prioritizing school projects around those initiatives. And then I wanted to touch a little bit on my riding because I know you're going to ask. Edmonton Glenora is beautiful and very dynamic. And if you look at the data, we're pretty much smack in the middle when it comes to things like income, education. We have all extremes. We have people who are brand new to Alberta, and we have many First Nations folks who live. In terms of Edmonton, we're one of the higher Indigenous population ridings. And we also have a mix of new development, including Blatchford right next door to us here, a ton of infill where corner lots that were single-family homes are now 4 or 8 plexes, and then a number of seniors residents that have been built since the last redraw of the boundaries. 2 of them are Christensen at Westmount and Glenora Park, also in the Glenora/Westmount area. So these have added hundreds of new electors and constituents in general. But the main thing I want to say again is that, like Priya, keeping like communities together and respecting municipal boundaries, I think, is one of the ways that we can make the work of MLAs most effective. And that piece of the things I was advocating for when I'd go meet with Pearl Callahayson are not the same things that the people are advocating for when they come to meet with me. Even young, very politically engaged folks. So. Yeah, those are sort of the key messages I want to leave, and I would like to have as much time for questions as possible.
You'll see on the map the population level, both last time and then for this commission.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Evans?
Oh, I should probably also say, I know you're allowed to add 2 new, or you are tasked with adding 2 new constituencies. I shouldn't say allowed. I believe that the vast majority of the growth has happened in the 2 largest cities in our province. So my proposal would be that they be added, 1 to Edmonton and 1 to Calgary.
Mr. Evans, any questions?
Yeah, so I just got introduced to a new concept here in Edmonton, the Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues. How many community leagues do you have in the electoral district of Glenora?
Yeah, I think it's 21. Yes. Not all of them have buildings. They all have representatives who are elected to help do programming for that area. So, for example, Blatchford doesn't have a building where they meet at, but there are a number of individuals that get together and put on block parties and other fun activities and advocate to the city as well. They have civics representatives to advocate around development issues.
So there would be 21 geographic community leagues with a member that would sit on the board?
So EFCL allows people to represent for a region. So each of those individual community areas has representatives, so president, vice president, so on, to make decisions for that specific neighborhood. And then I believe it's Edmonton West can represent somebody to sit on as a director for EFCL at large. So there is a director from the 21 combined, basically one representative democracy voice.
And that's considered the Edmonton West, is that what that is?
I believe that's the name now, but they've changed the names a few times, so I could be off. But I work mostly with the individual community leagues for each of the neighborhoods.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you for presenting the school board information. We hadn't been tasked with looking at that overlay yet, so that will raise some interesting conversations with us. So thank you for that, and I have no question.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah, thank you. And thank you. Again, the information about schools is instructive because it is a canary in the coal mine about where neighborhoods need infrastructure. And of course, it's the perennial difficulty if your city's growing like wildfire for school construction to keep up. And I take seriously your point about schools, particularly elementary and junior, as being a hub for communities. I mean, high school students tend to range further afield, but nonetheless, these are useful maps in spotting how Edmonton Public and Catholic are trying to catch up, as it were, with their building programs. But I have a couple of very specific thoughts about Glenora when it comes to building. We asked Mr. Shepherd, as you may recall, about where the growth pods may be in his district, and I'm going to ask you the same question.
Sure.
Where we're sitting right now, there's a growth pod happening on the airport land.
Yeah.
I can't think of anywhere else in your writing where it could happen. And, you know, I'm looking at the map, and you'll get a kick out of this. I look at Stony Plain Road and the map, it's Google. The map has a big sort of stop red light thing on Stony Plain Road.
Yeah.
And the construction goes on forever, right? I don't want to belabor that point, but it just brings to mind that your riding has not grown its population at a rate we see in other parts of the metro. And other than on the airport lands, I don't think you have any growth pod at all.
Oh, may I come and touch the map and talk about that a little bit?
You may indeed.
Okay. Good.
So one of the largest towers that was constructed in Edmonton was over here on 149th Place Road. So that this was and they're really focused on transit oriented development
In the city of Edmonton right now. So 149th and Stony Plain Road is an area where there's going to be a transit station. No, it is. This is Glenora. It's technically in Glenora still, just east of 149th.
Okay.
Yeah, or it might be 142nd actually. 142nd and Stony Plain Road. My apologies. So there's one massive tower that was built recently. I think they have about 400 units in it, and then there's a bunch of commercial on the main floors. There's also been, as I mentioned, 2 large seniors buildings that came in since the last redraw. So Christensen's on the Westmount, right by the Dairy Queen. If you feel like swinging by Dairy Queen on your way home, I often see a lot of my constituents from the seniors building there. And then the other one is Stony Plain Road, and just off 124th Street, there's one. And then this area on the east of 124th Street, Westmount East and Inglewood East, there is a number of areas where there were 4-story walk-ups that are being replaced with 8 or higher towers. So that's the highest density construction areas. But throughout the riding, especially I would say in the east half of the riding, you can't drive through a neighborhood without seeing at least 4 or 5 places where there was a single family, and now there's either 4 or 8 units being built on that same lot. So it's either townhouse. Often the 8 or even 9 are, it looks like townhouses, traditional townhouses, but each has a basement apartment as well, and then there's a garage suite above the 4-car garage. So there's a mix of high density construction as well as infill up to 3 stories, I would say, with with that. And then there's also along 111th Avenue, the city has been purchasing some of the lots and also have prospectors around land where density is going to be happening. And so there's a ton of brownfields right now where there used to be single families or gas stations or other types of small commercial available. So, and the population has risen by 8,000 since the last redraw. So maybe not as significant as Southwest Edmonton, but definitely more than we've seen historically in Edmonton in this part of the city.
Oh, thank you for that. That's very helpful. And what I draw from it is that there is imminent and tangible construction activity for residential as we speak. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Building just on those questions, just looking at my sort of trend, the population trend for Glenora has been pretty stable and pretty much tracks the same population trend as the rest of the province. Glenora was slightly under in terms of percentage growth, if I'm looking here. But right now we've got 52,496, which is about 4.5% below provincial average. But what I'm curious about is, given the growth you're talking about, do you anticipate that picking up? I guess I've seen, Blatchford's right here. How, and those are almost ready to occupy by the looks of it. But what's the scale of that? What's the timing? How like we're looking here for the next 7 to 10 years. Is the population growth likely to track the next 7 to 10 same as the last 7 to 10, or is it likely taking a bit of a tick up?
So in the last provincial election, I believe I had conversations with 100 residents, so a little over 2 years ago, who lived in Blatchford already. And while there is a lot of construction happening currently, that some people have been living there for 6 years, I think, already, because it's just being phased out by individual developers who buy up small parcels. I don't want to try to anticipate how quickly they'll go. Obviously, it depends on the economy. It depends on building permits. And but when you look on realtor.ca, which I do often, things are moving in there incredibly quickly. Like, they don't stay listed more than 48 hours, even things that are significantly more than houses 6 blocks to the west. So I think it's a very desirable community. A lot of people like that it's going to be a lower carbon footprint. And there's a transit station that's already built there that isn't operational yet until they have enough demand. But I think the supply and demand piece, as fast as the supply goes, the demand's going to keep up.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Hoffman. You have, and I said this yesterday, all presenters are equal, but we do appreciate when a member of the legislature comes and gives a presentation, because we know the the foot traffic you do through your constituency, and your riding better than anybody else probably. So we do appreciate your presentation very much. And the theme that we're learning as a non-Edmontonian, that I'm learning from that inner urban core, is consistent, and I appreciate it. And but we have work to do in the South, and how we deal with that. Your comments are helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now is a time where we're 10 minutes late, or we're going to have a break now for 10 minutes, so we'll be back at about 4:40 or 10:41 or so. Sure. presenter is Mr. Nathan Ip. Please come forward.
Good morning, Commission members. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to provide input on the important work that all of you are embarking, and especially want to recognize those staff as well who are supporting this work. My name is Nathan Ip. I am the MLA for Edmonton Southwest. The riding of Edmonton Southwest, as many of you know who've been there, is vibrant, fast-growing. It's often described as oblong-shaped and was once quoted or described by the Edmonton Journal as having the vague appearance of an abstract cockatoo looking over its shoulder. So something that I like to mention to folks when I describe Edmonton Southwest. My roots in the riding run deep in both sides of the river. I'm a longtime resident of Glastonbury, which is a neighborhood in the riding. And previous to my current role, I also served as the Edmonton Public School Board trustee for a good portion of the riding, specifically in the communities of Greater Windermere in the southern part of the riding. And so I've witnessed firsthand the growth of the area of the city. When I was first elected to the Edmonton Public School Board in 2013, the Glen Ridding and Keswick neighborhoods in Greater Windermere were still mostly farmland. And now it boasts a diverse community of young families and thriving businesses. It also has one of the larger concentrations in the city of folks from an ethnic and culturally diverse community, including Albertans from Chinese, Filipino, and South Asian backgrounds. It also has one of the youngest average ages in the city, with an average age of just 34 years. And so I have seen and experienced the unprecedented growth in population and the dire need for investment in community infrastructure such as libraries, schools, and hospitals, all of which are still lacking. And I've been part of many of those community efforts to advocate for schools and playgrounds and otherwise support community building. And so I have a vested interest to see the riding of Edmonton Southwest be fairly represented, and electoral divisions shouldn't just be a collection of disconnected communities and arbitrary boundaries to make numbers work. They should reflect and respect how people live and move, how they connect, their affinities and identities, and where they find community. So I would strongly advocate to the Commission to consider the following principles when undertaking their review, with the goal of encouraging meaningful democratic participation and representation. First, we need a map that is fair to all communities. The first principle is like communities along cultural, economic, and geographic communities should be respected. And that's why it's imperative that city boundaries be respected. So one way to approach and to think about this principle is ask the question, how do folks participate in community? And this will tell you where their affinity may lie when it comes to their geographic community. So I'll give you an example. Folks in Devon, despite their proximity to the southwestern edge of the riding, will rarely, and I don't think I've ever actually met a person from Devon, participate in Glastonbury movie nights or the Summer Fest that happens every year in the West End part of the city. But for folks from neighboring communities such as the Hamptons or Edgemont often will. And I think this tells you how folks identify with their community and where they gather. It is also important to note that cultural and racialized communities should remain intact. An example of this is the western part of the riding has a sizable Filipino Albertan population, and their needs and perspectives will be very different from those that might live in Stony Plain or those outside of the city. The second principle I'd like to highlight and advocate for is it's important to consider how people live and move. Edmonton Southwest, because of its shape and size, is really bifurcated by the river. Folks in Windermere, which is in the southern eastern part of the riding will access amenities such as the Terwilliger Rec Center, shops and businesses, and schools north of the Anthony Henday. Many students are actually designated to attend high school north of the Anthony Henday, and this reflects a much more natural traveling and gathering pattern. Fewer folks will necessarily move from east to west of the riding, and almost always without fail, when I speak to residents, they are often surprised. So when I speak to residents in Windermere, which is in the southern part of the riding, they're often very surprised to hear that they're part of the same riding as the northern tip, which is Granville by the River Creek Casino. They don't see themselves necessarily as part of the same area of the city, and vice versa. And so I can only imagine, I mean, that's just within a riding that is intact with the city of Edmonton. So I can only imagine the kind of confusion that might cause if we consider a rural-urban riding. Similarly, when we talk about these natural patterns, there's a greater sort of likeness between neighborhoods in the western part of the riding with neighborhoods further east. So, for example, folks in the Glastonbury neighborhood will often shop and gather minutes away at Collingwood Marketplace, even though it's sort of not within the riding. The third principle that I'd like to submit to the panel is that there needs to be fair representation by population. I think every member is perhaps aware that Edmonton Southwest is often double the size and population of the average of many ridings across the province. And so that certainly needs to be addressed. But again, I would emphasize that like communities and city boundaries are respected. For Edmontonians, and I think Edmontonians in this room would probably agree, whether you're from Edgemont or Cameron Heights or Windermere, we take pride in our community. We don't necessarily see ourselves as part of folk in a municipality outside of city boundaries, such as Devon. And I would say, if I use Devon as an example, residents of Devon similarly take pride in their town. And I've spoken to city councillors and residents, and they certainly don't see themselves as an extension of Edmonton. Devon and Edmonton are different, not only in geography, but in perspective and identity. And so, in summary, like communities, as well as municipal boundaries should be respected. And I would also encourage the Commission to really consider what I refer to as identity and affinity, which is often harder to grasp, but it's really this concept of where folks see themselves. Where do they see themselves as being a part of? And because I think that if we create boundaries that are ill-considered, there is the risk of fragmenting communities, which would cause greater confusion and ultimately disengage voters. Thank you very much for your time and for your consideration. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Start on this end, Greg.
Yeah, boy, gosh, Edmonton Southwest and the whole South Edmonton's a huge, kind of a tough nut to crack as it relates to how we reshuffle things. It's really undeniable that something has to change just legally. I think we cannot be as Southwest or South Edmonton can't be as big as it is. So I guess I'll ask I guess I'm developing a bit of a theme here. Clearly, there's growth in Edmonton Southwest. That's undeniable. Where is it happening? How present tense is it, if you will? What's your what sort of hard evidence do you have around a forecast for what the next 7 to 10 years might look like? And I guess what I'm really asking is, to quote a great Edmontonian, if we can skate to where the puck is going to be on some of these things, looking at what the growth is. Again, this one I think was set, let me just look at my magic data. It was set pretty much exactly at the average in 2016-17, and it's now 39% over. Right?
Yeah.
So is that growth likely to continue in a linear fashion? Is it going to go more, or have we sort of peaked and it's sort of leveling out. I guess I appreciate your comments on that.
Well, I used to, so when I was a Edmonton Public School Board trustee, I was chair of the infrastructure committee. And at one point in time, I had stats readily available. I don't know if these stats are still completely accurate, but I'm going to use them sort of for illustration purposes and for just as an anecdote for our discussion. So back in 2021, I believe in the communities of Windermere, for example, that community was only about 50% built out. So if you're using sort of census data from 2021, the build out at that particular point in time was only about 50%. If you drive down there, you'll see the differences. I mean, for me, that who lives in the riding and is there every single day, I am surprised at how new houses pop up by the week, and anybody who sort of will take a drive along new and fast-growing neighborhoods in the city will see that. So I think the trajectory will continue to rise quite quickly, as we have seen in the last 10 years. And I do have a suggestion. In my school board days, planners would often sort of address the risk of growth because we don't really know how much the growth will be. We can certainly anticipate. They will often make the boundary smaller, attendance area boundaries rather. If we're using that as an example, they will make the attendance area boundaries smaller rather than larger because of that anticipated growth. And even with that kind of prudence, the Edmonton Public School Board was not able to fully accommodate all of the students that ultimately came into those neighborhoods, even with a smaller attendance area boundary that they had drawn. So I think if we use that as an example, I would certainly, and we liken it to electoral boundaries, I would say that the growth in those new neighborhoods continues to be fast-paced, and if we're to mitigate some of those risks, probably a smaller boundary, a smaller area would make more sense.
Thank you.
Any other question?
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. And yes, it is quite obvious this district has grown and keeps growing very rapidly. And it only takes a brief look at a map to see that the area that was on the inside of the Henday when your riding was small and cuddly probably has to be given back because you're now so large and sprawling that other accommodations are going to be made, I think. And I think that's pretty obvious. The other thing that strikes me here is the river. I mean, obviously, we have a long-standing tradition of straddling the river with respect to Edmonton Riverview. But ordinarily, we try to avoid that sort of thing. And, the growth in your current riding is so massive, I mean, we're a bit bewildered. But, the whole area to the southwest of the current riding, immediately west of Windermere, that's growing rapidly as well. And I'm looking at a Google map here. There's a very large area on 23 Ave. The ground's being scraped out. There's no doubt this is being developed for residents.
That's correct. So west of Windermere and west and north of Windermere, you'll find that there's, I think you're probably referring to River's Edge community. That is a newer community that is there. I should note that when the city approved the area structure plan for Windermere and surrounding areas, at one point it was the largest area structure plan in the city. So that'll give you a sense of how much anticipated growth there will be.
Thank you. We have time for one more very direct question. We're pressed for time. Any? Good.
Area structure plans in specifically 077 on the map, so trending south, I'm not from Edmonton, so I'm not exactly sure where Windermere is, but I want to know about what area structure plans you're aware of for the development moving south. I think that's south. Down.
Yeah. No, sometimes I wish I was still on the school board. I would know this information. I'm not currently aware any area structure plans right now south of kind of the city boundaries. Essentially, all of the farmland that can be acquired has been acquired, and it would have been included in the Windermere area structure plan. But I could be wrong. You might have new information.
Is everything moving south all farmland? Is that?
Yeah, it is. It is essentially farmland. All of that. There's a good chunk right before the city boundary that is farmland.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. No supplementary. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for coming. And as I said before, we do really appreciate when members of the legislature come to them. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Our next presenter is Ben Aquaya. Sir, tell me if my pronunciation is close.
I'm a teacher and I'm in a very gracious mood today. I'll give you 97%.
Okay. Thank you. Can you tell me how I get 100%? And introduce yourself.
My name is Ben Aquay. And I am from Edmonton. I'm a voter from Edmonton Southwest constituency.
Okay.
And my family and I, we've lived in the riding since 2012, when we moved into Canada from the UK. I have been following the work of the Boundary Commission, and I have a strong interest in the outcomes here. And I want to express my gratitude to you, the commissioners, for your dedication to this task. Redrawing boundaries is complex and it demands careful consideration. And you have the opportunity to do that. Unlike the last one, in your case, you actually have a luxury of 2 new ridings. So there's room to work. I am a parent of 3 young people, and we are active in the community through church, through hockey, and a few other engagements. Now, as you alluded to in the last presentation, Edmonton Southwest is really growing, will continue to grow. Through a number of volunteer opportunities I've seen, a growth in this community in terms of diverse communities growing. And that's one thing about a lot of racialized communities. Their growth is fast, is quick, it happens, and it's sustainable, it's sustained. So I have seen lots of pockets of racialized communities. And so just connecting with the question from the last presentation, is there room for growth? Absolutely. Racialized communities grow big and quickly, as you've seen across the province. And so especially in that middle section of that map there, it is definitely growing and growing fast. When I've been there to speak to kids about hockey, about public speaking, and other things I'm involved in, you see lots of new families moving in, and that trend will continue. There are a lot of neighborhoods which make up Edmonton Southwest at the moment. Glen Riding, Keswick, Glastonbury, Windermere, the Hamptons, the Uplands, Edgemont, Ambleside, Stillwater, Glen Riding Heights, Ravine, Cameron Heights, Riverview, Wedgwood Heights, Rivers Edge, Jameson Place, The Grange, Woodburn Crescent, River Valley, and Windermere. Uplands, Edgemont, Riverview area, those areas are mostly around the river. They are growing so fast. And because a lot of these are minorities, ethnic minorities, I expect that growth to be even quicker than it has been. Now, one of the biggest reasons why it's such a community is because of the diversity in there and our connection to the city. Our kids go to the same schools, and have done since we moved here. These kids play on the same sports teams, and therefore that brings parents together. Edmonton White Mud Hockey Club pulls from this area. And then when you grow and you're a bit better or very good, you go play at CAC. This is CAC's catchment area, and as you know, CAC stands for the Canadian Athletic Club. It's one of the most treasured hockey clubs in Alberta and perhaps in the country. It's over 100 years old, or nearly. And my kid plays at CAC with kids who have grown up from this area. So you're looking at a group of kids throughout this area who have grown up together, done similar things together, and will grow into adulthood together. And we want to keep that the way it is. And that is my plea to you. I think given how fast and how much it's growing, it may even be better to split this into two so that we would have a dedicated Edmonton Northwest riding to accommodate this growth. So we've talked about population growth, and we also need to talk about the people who make up Edmonton Southwest. When it comes to economic activity, the activity is, according to the stats from the Alberta government, it's quite spread out, some retail, some professional services, educational services. So it's a good mix of people and a good mix of levels of education as well. So a lot of, again, young people would have grown up with people similar to their circumstances, all connected to the city of Edmonton. And that makes this quite a nice area to live in. I would say that I expect that the growth will continue, and it's a young population, and you want to give people the chance to grow together, to be able to share those memories as they grow older, and especially to connect with their politicians and the city, talking about the challenges and hopes and aspirations that they have as a group. So essentially, I think the case for Edmonton Southwest to perhaps end up as Edmonton Northwest and then Edmonton Southwest would be a good one. So this is essentially my presentation to you. I admire your work, and I wish you nothing but the very best. Thank you most kindly.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. I'm sure we're going to have questions, so I'm going to start with Mr. Evans on this side, and we'll go across. Any questions?
Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned first racialized communities.
Yes.
Can you tell me what you mean by that, and then can you identify any?
I mean communities that are not white. So there's a strong Filipino, Chinese, Black from so many different backgrounds that are growing and thriving in Edmonton Southwest. A lot of people have moved out of province and even within province to Edmonton Southwest. It is an amazing community to visit, and that is what I mean. And at this rate, it wouldn't surprise me if in the next 10 years, the racialized communities are at par. We're getting quite close now. And if that trend continues, we could easily be at par with the non-racialized community. But the beautiful thing is we work together, we live together, pray together, we do everything together. And our kids are growing up together. And so the challenges, the hopes, the aspirations they face will be similar. And our connection to Edmonton is the one universal thing. And we'd like to keep it that way.
I'd like to ask you about communities of interest.
Yes.
So in terms of the racialized communities that you've talked about, are they located as would you identify them as communities of interest? And where would they be located in the central or south of, central or north?
So the beautiful thing is, thank you very much, Commissioner Evans. The beautiful thing is, it's not just like we are all in one little pocket. In every of the communities I mentioned, there's a strong racial presence, neighbors left and right to you. It's just a beautiful mix. You see it in the schools as well. When the kids go to school, you see it in the sports they play. It's a beautiful mix. And that will continue to grow. And that is the point that we're trying to make.
One last question. Do you know the number of community leagues within your electoral district?
So because there's a new area, it's taking a while. So there are more established ones like Glastonbury and Edmonton have community league. But believe it or not, we don't even have buildings for our community leagues because it's such a new area. And so we expect way more growth to happen. And I'm excited that kids in this area will see the Canada that we all see, a diverse, respectful, collaborative community living, growing, and thriving together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Akwe.
Thank you,
for the definition and expansion on racialized communities. I find that very informative. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Good question.
I just want to follow up on a couple of points in your characterization of these new communities. And you suggest that they are younger populations, not just the children, but the adults as well. And that sort of makes sense because since they're new, there aren't, people my age already there. But I think you're quite right to point to team sports for youths as an indicative measure of the growth of these communities. Now, earlier, MP Hoffman gave us these quite useful maps of the schools, and I noticed there really aren't any in your district, so you better get onto your school trustee.
Absolutely. And, to that point, for me, it's about the children because they grow up, they're making good memories, and they represent the Canada that we all enjoy. And they are growing together, they are playing sport together, they are all connected to the city. And for those of you who are outside the city of Edmonton, or look up the CAC, the Canadian Athletic Club, storied history of hockey. And these kids grow up, play, up until you're a teenager, you play for Whiteman. And the dream is to play for CAC because this is the catchment area. And you want to make CAC, and you want to get there with your friends. The beautiful thing is, I, as an immigrant who came here, my kids are playing with kids whose parents play together. And I can imagine the possibilities for these kids into the future. And that is something I would want them to have as well.
Great. I cannot possibly top that as a closer, so I would just leave that. Thank you very, very, very much. That was incredible. Thank you.
Sir,
yes.
One thing I haven't mentioned today, one of the tasks of the commission is to name the new electoral district. Mm-hmm. So, and I thought I understood you to say that if we divide it, current Edmonton Southwest into two constituencies, did I hear you say it should be named Edmonton Northwest and Edmonton Southwest?
Yes.
Okay. would you be content with Edmonton West and Edmonton Southwest?
I would be, but, you know.
It's not really north.
Well, true, but the key thing is, well, most postcodes in Edmonton would say northwest, even though when you look at where they are in the city, it's not really northwest. So we do take some liberties with our geographical placement in Edmonton here. But I would like the riding to be contiguous. And yes, Edmonton West, Edmonton Northwest, so long as we retain our connections to Edmonton, and these kids do. And so for the sake of the children, please keep us within Edmonton.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate your
Thank you, Montani. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.
Natural break is the handbar.
Okay. Okay, we're going to move now. We're running about 20 minutes late, so if questions can be shorter and briefer and the answers equally, we'll make it through by noon. Kyle Kasawaski?
It seems like you all have an image of the riding, so maybe we'll count. And I have let's just start. Who's the council? Anyways, thank you for having me. We'll get this set up. I'm Kyle Kozowski, the MLA for Sherwood Park, and I'd like to tell everybody in the Assembly, all roads lead to Sherwood Park, but as the MLA for Edmonton, Laura would also say all roads also lead out of Sherwood Park. I grew up in Sherwood Park. I lived there from age 4 to 24. I've lived in Edmonton and Calgary and BC. My family has been in Sherwood Park since 1978, and my brother actually bought the home from my parents, and so that family home has almost been in the family for almost 50 years. So within my role, I'm also municipal affairs critic and shadow minister for the opposition. So I have a chance to visit and communicate with people from rural municipalities, urban municipalities, and villages all across the province. Within Sherwood Park, I'd like to point out our probably the Boundaries Commission in 2017, I think, got it quite right. So if you're looking for an advocate for change, that won't be me. I feel there's some history and experience with other boundary commissions, with the federal commissions. A couple of times we've had past experiences where there was a riding of Edmonton, Sherwood Park. There was also an attempt this last Boundaries Commission federally to have a riding of Sherwood Park, Beaumont, which received quite strong protest from the municipal leaders in Sherwood Park, and they retracted that change in the drawing. The county, which you see on the map here, I'll bring reference to, but I'll finish through a couple of just details I want to make sure I highlight. In terms of services like utility, for Sherwood Park, we have Arrow Utilities, Edmonton has EPCOR. For electricity, we have Fortis, Edmonton has EPCOR. For police, we have the RCMP, which, fun fact, they surveyed Sherwood Park. 87% of Sherwood Park loves the RCMP. They asked residents at the University of Alberta in the Lister Hall if they would like free beer. 86% they said they would like free beer. So the RCMP are more popular in Sherwood Park than free beer. The food banks, we have our own Strathcona County Food Bank. We have our own housing foundation, the Heartland Housing Foundation versus, let's say, Edmonton, which has the VITA. We have a really amazing organization for people with disabilities called Robin Hood Association, which I know people move to Sherwood Park because of the services provided by Robin Hood. Our service clubs like Rotary Club are independent. We have strong retail, and we have our own Costco. But also, the Go Auto Group started a new retail group called Loca, and they brought their flagship to Sherwood Park. We have our own sports clubs, minor sports clubs, arts and recreation clubs.
we have our own museum, which is documenting our history. Sherwood Park is only as old as 1955. It was a community that was built as a place to have residence for Imperial Oil. And so we have the Strathcona Industrial Association. Within my riding, if you look on the map, you will see a very empty area that is full of energy refineries. Tierra is there, Imperial Oil is there, Suncor Energy is there, Gibson has tank farms there. Pembina Pipelines has their head office in Sherwood Park, and Enbridge has a large presence in my riding. In fact, on the map, you'll see a road that kind of goes from the urban parts of Sherwood Park into the industrial parts. It's called Petroleum Way. It goes under the Anthony Henday. When they built that road, they made sure we had a direct connection for workers from Sherwood Park to get into the industrial area for their ships. Strathcona County has about a population that's 75% urban. It's roughly 100,000 people living in this area, 25% rural. The electoral districts numbered 1 to 8 are largely, we have about 62 or 5 of 8 are urban, and then we have the rural presence as well. I noticed where the questions were getting into from some of the other presenters. It's on the website. You've noted that our riding has about 8% off of the provincial average, or about 8% below. But we have a lot of urban growth happening. So if I can just put the map up here. Within this area here, we have a neighborhood called Cambrian, which when I got elected 2 years ago had no houses, now is well on the way to 1,000 homes. It's going to have 12,000 people in the riding. North of it, there's Hearthstone, which is a Mattamy development. Another probably 12,000 people will be inside that part of the riding. Deep down here in the contours of this, number 3, there's a high-density area called Salisbury Village. We'll have about 1,200 people that will be living it. So we have quite a lot of urban growth happening within the area. I would also just like to acknowledge and look at something that you have to look at for Strathcona Sherwood Park or some other ridings here, and Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville. So Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville actually borders right here into Strathcona County, which is an interesting delineation. But Bremner is a planned community. It'll be starting its first subdivision this year, so groundworks have started. So they'll be probably moving towards about, within Mr. Clark's questions about the next 7 to 10 years, for sure they'll have about 12,000 people within the next 7 to 10 years. It's a planned community of 70,000 to equal the population of Sherwood Park. It's been quite a large thing to be considered. Ardrossan, the developers call it the kingdom of Ardrossan. It's planned to be an urban center of about 15,000 people. And so that's within the borders of Strathcona Sherwood Park right now. And Bremner right now, I think this will be one of your more interesting questions to answer. Where should this be? Currently it is within Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville, but again, just keep in mind where that is going into the future. I think I've covered off the developments, and I've covered off the Federal Boundaries Commission's errors and praised this commission, your predecessors, for their great work. I'll just lastly mention about Sherwood Park. I'm quite proud of the electoral history there. It's always number 1 or 2 in terms of voter participation in provincial elections for voter turnout. And it's had over 4 parties represent the urban riding of Sherwood Park in the last since 1986, when the boundary was formed. I would say from a Sherwood Park perspective, we feel quite independent and really love the identity of being the riding of Sherwood Park. It is a place we're quite proud of. We are still the world's largest hamlet, and we will continue to be that, hopefully, going on into the future. And I'm happy to take questions from you and have discussions about whatever on your mind.
Great, starting with you.
You are an excellent listener, so you've preempted my question, where things are. That's exactly what I was curious about, and sort of quantify. And just to make sure I heard correctly, Bremner within the next 5-ish years, 10 to 12,000, is that? sort of the
Yeah, like the whole
working
plan is for 70,000 in that area that's identified there. Like it will be a community very similar to the population to Sherwood Park. But groundworks is starting, so me just thinking like I'm spitballing on that a little bit. I'm looking at Cambrian, which is on that map where number 4 is, which is in my writing. It's expected to be 12,000. Is their area? I think it's called area structure plan. I saw that was 12,500 is their plan. And so now they're starting the first, I guess, division within Brevner. This is the Qualico development, and so I'm just going to say about 12,000. But they'll probably have before the next boundary division.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, and go mighty Hamlet. I live in Sherwood Park. And I have read the area structure plans because I'm a geek for that kind of thing. So I have, no, they're actually very well written. There's better prose in there than most of them. But I wanted to press a little further on your identification of these growth pods. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. But Bremner, if they're cutting ground this summer, you know, that's very good. Cambrian's already started. Androssan, no, not yet, right?
Androssan?
Yeah.
They're selling lots and building homes in Androssan.
Okay, that's good, because we've been having a discussion among ourselves about what counts as new growth. You know, how people go on. A developer buys a parcel and then maybe doesn't develop it for donkey's years. So you have identified parcels that are tangible and imminent.
Yes.
Growth zones. And that's what we like to hear. So I thank you for that. And yet, as you point out, Bremner's not in your electoral district, but it's so adjacent that it is worth bringing to our attention.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, good presentation. Thank you.
John, any comments, questions?
No, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, sir. As I said, we do appreciate your presentation, and look forward to the rest of the morning. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for your work on this.
That now brings us to Laura Paquette. We're only 25 minutes late from what we told you, but please proceed.
Try to keep it short. Good morning. My name is Laura Paquette. I am born and raised in Edmonton, and I would like to speak about Sherwood Park as well, but also Edmonton Meadows. I've traveled to about 25 countries, so you can say I love maps. I'm familiar with them, and I have some thoughts on the naming of the ridings as well. But I have a deep appreciation for both how communities function and how they're represented. I was a teacher for 15 years, Edmonton Catholic schools for 12 of them. And I also own some rural property in Tofield, which is at the far end of, basically just off the boundary of Strathcona County, down Highway 14. I want to talk about the importance of keeping Sherwood Park intact as a riding, largely unchanged with a few tweaks perhaps to take into consideration the new areas. But also Edmonton Meadows is another growing area. If you're familiar with the map that Kyle had up, just imagine it's still there. So good. Sherwood Park, actually, the Strathcona County came up with their own map, and I ripped this one off of stacks of them at the town hall. They have one side has Strathcona County, it's expansive area all the way up to Elk Island National Park. And then the other side, very interesting, they've decided what to focus on in terms of the urban map. And I like what they did with that, and I'd like that to be the riding of Sherwood Park, because it really is a sense of identity of the urban population in Sherwood Park. As I said, I have some rural property near Tofield, lived there on that acreage for 3 years, and now I've moved back to Edmonton Meadows, where I've spent most of my adult life. But I work in Sherwood Park, so I commute back and forth all the time. There's Sherwood Park. a lot of these ridings look like jigsaw puzzle pieces, and I do love a good jigsaw puzzle. But I think it can be a bit confusing for people when you try to explain that there are two MLAs for Sherwood Park, and there are two ridings both called Sherwood Park. One is Strathcona Sherwood Park, not to be confused with Edmonton Strathcona, and we get that quite a bit too. It's divided down Clover Bar Road, and I would advocate for moving that over to Highway 21, because certainly it divides, it's a weird place to divide it, where even the county itself identifies the urban catchment of Sherwood Park, the hamlet itself, as being more of a square shape. And so I would love just a nice cube of Sherwood Park. And to take into consideration one other new development that Kyle didn't mention is Hillshire, and that is just south of Y Road. There are houses being built and bought and sold there right now, including some higher density homes that look like single family homes, but they've built in a legal basement suite. So they're thinking with higher density in mind, to have these legal basement suites already part of the plan. So I believe that the riding of Sherwood Park should include that Hillshire as well, because the routes that people travel and get to school and work is all along Y Road. So I'll skip over what Kyle's already talked about. He's a great advocate for Sherwood Park. On a personal note, my daughter attends a Francophone school in Sherwood Park. We speak French and English at home. Her Francophone school board is a public school board, Conseil Scolaire Centre Nord, that covers all of Sherwood Park. And it goes up to Fort Saskatchewan, all the way out to Toefield. And so really a great school, because I could live anywhere in that whole zone and she would stay in the same school. They are growing so fast. They're building a brand new building, and it's opening in September in Sherwood Park, and that is along Regency Drive. So just outside of what the boundary is now because of the dividing line being Clover Bar Road. It's another example of how Sherwood Park is kind of this unique identity that everyone at this school, they might live all around, but all the birthday parties and all the events, everything's in Sherwood Park, the bowling alley, and the Millennium Place, Rec Center. The schools, the services, the community programming all reflect a cohesive urban identity. The Sherwood Park residents vote together, learn together, live their lives together, and so they should be represented together by one representative. As the community grows, we want to take into account Cambrian, as Kyle said, north of Highway 16, Hillshire, which is south of Y Road, as well as Salisbury Village. All the neighborhoods are identified on this map as well, so I could leave it here. They're beginning to have community associations. Some of them are more well-established, and so a lot like the Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues, Sherwood Park has some community associations as well. Right now, the boundaries confuse voters in Sherwood Park, and a lot of people don't understand why the county map is very different from the electoral maps provincially. But because I want to keep it quick, I want to switch over to Edmonton Meadows. And it's thematically very similar, but it's an odd puzzle piece that could be a square. And I love the simplicity of very natural boundaries. I believe Edmonton Meadows includes a lot of new growth as well. So my son is starting high school in Edmonton Meadows. They have a brand new high school. It's been open 1 year already, called Elder Dr. Francis Whiskey Jack. And it is right beside the Edmonton Meadows Rec Center. And along 17th Street there we go. An interesting shape. We've got a by-election happening in Edmonton Ellerslie, which is south of 23rd Avenue. But I do believe Edmonton Meadows should extend all the way to 50th Street and follow the Anthony Henday and the White Mud. Although the sense of identity as being part of the Meadows really starts at 34th Street. East of 34th Street, people consider themselves more in the Meadows. And there's even a sign that says, "Welcome to Mill Woods." And that's the west side of 34th Street. So Meadows is unique. All along that bottom chunk there, looks like Florida maybe, the Panhandle, it is Astor Gardens, and all of that is serving that new high school, brand new developments there as well, and a lot of high density apartments and things too, so that population is going to go up. Other than that weird blip at the bottom, it could go over to 50th Street. I think it's great the way it is, so that cutout should probably be part of the Meadows.
Would you mind going to the map?
Sure.
I have two disabilities. I'm not from Edmonton, and I can't read the street names. So would you mind pointing those out?
So I live here. The 17th Street is right here.
Yeah.
So there's the Anthony Henday Drive freeway here. And just going up here is all new neighborhoods there, and the new high school and the rec center are right in here. So,
but you suggested cutting it off at 34.
So right now, 34th Street is here, and that's east of 34th Street. People identify as having being part of the Meadows.
Okay.
And things are called the Meadows. They have community leagues as well. Laurel and the Meadows are two different community leagues. But really, this whole area, the natural boundary for it would be 50th Street. And right now, there's part of this is Mill Woods and part of it is Ellerslie. And so it's a bit of a hodgepodge, bit of a pinwheel thing going on there. And so I do think the Meadows could just be a nice, simple square from 50th Street to the Henday and White Mud at the northern boundary of it.
That's going to put a really high population level, though. You're way over. You're at the max right now.
Yeah. So Ellerslie is quite big. So
Right.
if we needed to reduce some of Ellerslie, then that's what I would lose. You know, there's some give and take there of the growing city. But certainly it's great the way it is, but it's worth taking into consideration the growth happening east of 17th Street.
Okay, good.
Yes, this is the Laurel neighborhood, and they've got their own community league as well, but that certainly is a weird cutout to belong to the rest of Ellerslie, which is south of the Anthony Henday.
You did indicate you were going to talk about name.
I do think there should only be one Sherwood Park.
Okay.
And Edmonton Meadows is just fine the way it is. But Ardrossan and Bremner are two great names. So Strathcona County, Ardrossan and Bremner are real hubs for that second Sherwood Park riding. Tofield probably more closely identifies with Strathcona County as well. So it's another community that could be.
Strathcona County, Ardrossan, and Bremner.
Yeah. And Sherwood Park is unique and distinct as its own hamlet identity.
Sure. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. I'm pushing a little bit on time. Where are we start? Mr. Evans, a very quick question.
No question.
Susan?
I'm good, thank you.
This one, Strathcona County straddles 3 electoral districts, and has done so for a long time. So people are confused. Have they been confused for a very long time?
Probably. It really is because of the word Sherwood Park being in bold.
Yeah.
And the proliferation of Googling everything. I think when they look up Sherwood Park MLA or Sherwood Park, who do I vote for, where do I vote, it's that confusion.
Thank you.
Great. No. Well, thank you very much. Do you want to just pass that up?
Yeah.
Take it along. We don't start with Mr. Evans.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Victoria Pearson.
Good morning, panel. I imagine it's been a very long few days for you so far. My name is Victoria Pearson. I am a lifelong Edmontonian, and I come before this panel as a community volunteer and advocate that has spent the past decade poring over electoral maps to connect communities with their elected representatives. I recently moved to Edmonton Gold Bar, which is where I am raising my family, but I previously lived in Edmonton Riverview, and I still do work there. So I'm going to be talking about both of those ridings. I believe that a fair and inclusive electoral map needs three things. It needs to be easy to understand and navigate. It needs to be a reasonable size to effectively represent their communities, and it needs to respect existing boundaries like municipal borders. So specifically talking about the third point there, rural representation versus urban representation, I think those communities have very different needs. They really have, in Alberta, specific differences between rural and urban, but also between large urban centers like Edmonton and smaller urban centers like Leduc or Sherwood Park. The recent legislation changes state that the Boundary Commission may consider municipal boundaries when drawing the map, but I believe it's imperative that these borders are respected. This will ensure elected representatives can focus on specific issues that impact their communities and better advocate for their constituents. A pertinent example that has been brought up a couple times here, Edmonton Gold Bar extends from the Mill Creek Ravine in Edmonton all the way out to the edge of the city, where it buffers up against Sherwood Park. So the industrial area between Edmonton and Sherwood Park forms a really natural barrier between the two regions. And if we don't respect the municipal boundaries, a potential riding could encompass the two municipalities. It's simply illogical to have a riding that represents the edge of Edmonton and the edge of Sherwood Park, but is separated by large swaths of industrial land and highways. The populations may look the same on the surface level, with many families, high likelihood that people work in Edmonton and are commuting by car, but the barrier of the industrial area would make it very difficult for an MLA to effectively engage both sides of the riding. Further on that, to consider rural, urban, or urban ridings would result in MLAs needing to triage the concerns of constituents and would dilute their ability to effectively advocate for their communities. Different concerns could get ignored entirely depending on the makeup of the riding, if it has a higher proportion of rural or urban constituents and their corresponding concerns. Another pertinent example would be the Federal Boundary Commission, because they just completed their work. And they did a really effective redistribution in my mind, where they changed the previous Banff-Airdrie electoral district into the Yellowhead riding, where Banff is now encompassed with the other areas in the national park, and then Airdrie-Cochrane. So I think that just really helps emphasize the more appropriate representation that constituents will receive, with people in Banff, Canmore, and Jasper being represented by the same MP, since they have similar interests and challenges with being a tourist hotspot and existing in a national park. And then the MP for Airdrie-Cochrane can focus on issues that smaller urban centers may be facing, and rural areas as well, like industry and development. So next, I want to talk about population growth, because Edmonton has seen a very significant increase in population growth and density. So the new ridings that we're talking about, the Commission is adding 2 new ridings. I believe they should be placed in areas with increased population growth, and the Federal Boundary Commission split the 2 South Edmonton ridings into 3, where they're adjusted to respect the white mud as a natural northern barrier. They also added a riding in Northeast Calgary and the above-mentioned Airdrie-Cochrane. A key factor when considering population growth, particularly in Edmonton, is recent densification. The central ridings of Edmonton Gold Bar, Strathcona, Riverview, and then Glenora and Highlands Norwood all have increased housing density because of the new zoning rules that the Edmonton City Council has put in place. So they allow for multiple units on one lot anywhere essentially in the city, and it's up to 8 units. So we are seeing in Edmonton Riverview in particular a drastic increase in these 4 to 8 unit lot developments, which means that the population and density is going to be increasing significantly, but not in the same way that is increasing in the south. So in the south, you're seeing a lot more like single family dwellings, and there's a lot of newcomer populations that are coming into the south. But then in Edmonton Riverview, you're looking at just an increased density. So I really don't think that like the central ridings in particular, but Riverview specifically should change significantly at all, because their populations are still going to be representative of what is the current makeup. But I do think you would want to consider that densification when looking at the boundaries in the city here. So lastly, I wanted to talk about ease of navigation. I think it's important how residents conceptualize their immediate area for any electoral map. Residents within Edmonton would be more likely to feel closely connected to the city rather than connected to nearby communities like Sherwood Park or Leduc. And if we again look at Gold Bar and Riverview as examples, residents in Riverview are separated by the river but connected by the white mud for vehicle travel and the River Valley Path network for biking and walking. Their daily habits frequently take them from one side of the river to the other for work, school, or errands. But in contrast, the residents in Gold Bar do not frequently travel to Sherwood Park and more often are traveling toward Edmonton's downtown or toward the University of Alberta. My trips to Sherwood Park are for specialty stores and visiting family mostly, whereas it's a specific trip rather than something that I do daily. But overall, that is my presentation. Thank you for taking my perspective into consideration, and I look forward to seeing the proposed map in the future.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pearson. Questions, starting at Mr. Edmonton? No, but thank you for your presentation.
I'm good, thank you.
Well, to be consistent, we have asked several other presenters, and perhaps you heard us, ask the question about growth pods. I very much appreciate the remark about the zoning bylaw having changed so that you can densify pre-existing lots. And I think we heard a presentation this morning from about Highlands Norwood, and I think we are going to see that bylaw as a significant driver of population growth there. Now, Gold Bar itself doesn't really have any more space to put in more ground level residences. So do you, off the top of your head, do you know of any imminent and tangible construction of residential units in Gold Bar?
Well, my home neighborhood is Bonnie Doon,
yeah,
and a fair amount of the buildings there, they used to be small single-family houses that were built around the 50s and 60s. They're now being turned into a duplex or even a fourplex. I specifically live in a duplex that was built 10 years ago, and as I was wandering around the neighborhood, there was a particularly remarkable development a few blocks away where it was 8 units on one corner lot within Bonnie Doon. And they were like quite large. It wasn't just 2 or 4 in one house and a couple of garage suites. It was like 2 townhome rows on a corner. So there are these significant developments that are happening within our mature communities. So we're seeing the real estate turnover to be pretty quick, and their lots are not just sitting. They're either being developed or new families are moving in.
I would ask a similar question about Riverview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Riverview is similar.
Particularly west of 149th Street?
That's exactly where I was thinking.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're looking in the areas around where the new LRT is being built, that's 87th Avenue and 156th Street, there are a lot of developments that are coming up on the fourplex kind of build with 4 basement suites that we're seeing them along 95th Avenue, not so much on 87th Ave because there's more apartments, but in that kind of Sherwood, Jasper Place, Meadowlark area.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Pearson. We appreciate it.
Would you like a copy of my remarks?
Please leave it with Aaron.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got 3 presenters before noon. Ben Croker.
Well, good morning, everybody. Let me just first off say that I just want to acknowledge that you guys have a difficult decisions to make as a commission, and I recognize that populations shift and move and change, and so Albertans need appropriate and equal representation. It's important to do. I also have to beg the Commission's pardon. It's the first time that I have done this, and so I'll have to apologize for my inexperience. I'm not bringing with me a lot of stats or political theory, but just some observations as someone in the community. My name is Ben Craker. I am a pastor. I serve at Steel Heights Baptist Church in the Edmonton Manning riding. I also live in the neighborhood of McConaughey, which is about 7 minutes north of Steel Heights Baptist Church in the McLeod Steel Heights area. I didn't become a pastor for power and prestige. In fact, I feel like a little part of my soul dies a little bit each time someone addresses me as a pastor. I became a pastor to serve the congregants that we are in our midst, and also our community as well, which is why I'm here today. One of the things that encourages me as I speak to MLAs and MPs and councillors and candidates is that oftentimes what I hear from them is that they are in their position to serve their communities as well. And I'm thankful that I see that a lot of the times. I find that it is easier to serve a community in an area when there is cohesion and history. One of the pastors that I work with, the lead pastor at our church, Darren Platt, he often talks about community or Edmonton being built up around community leagues, community associations, and neighborhoods. Edmonton is a federation of those aspects. And so there's a cohesion to being identified together as you serve each other as neighbors, live together, as children go to schools together and play sports together. There's a cohesion that comes from being in a neighborhood. There's also a cohesion that comes when you're interfacing with representation as well. So in our area, it's MLA Heather Sweet. And so I think that makes it easier when neighborhoods can identify together and to bring their concerns together as well. It also makes it easier to serve out of history. The church I work at and serve at celebrated 50 years in that location in 2021. I've been able to serve there for 8 years, and you definitely get a sense of the history and that they have been there for so long. Oftentimes we talk about starting that church, there was a field, and then houses grew up around that church. And when you have a history together, you build an identity together as well. And so it doesn't help when at a representation level, an identity gets split as well, when history builds up connection with each other. So breaking up community makes it harder to interface in a cohesive manner and also build a collective history together. So my encouragement to the Commission would be to consider bringing whole communities and neighborhoods into new boundary lines if that's what's necessary to balance out population growth, which is definitely something that we're experiencing in that far northeast of Edmonton, and divide that by clear distinctions and separations by things like major roads. That, I suppose, is my encouragement as someone who serves in the community and lives in the community as well. So thank you for indulging this inexperienced representation.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Corcoran. Appreciate it. Questions, Mr. Corcoran?
Yeah, we have Edmonton Manning, as you can see from our population, that's Gold Bar, which is a fabulous place as well. It's over quite a bit, about 21, 22% over. So I'm curious if you have some thoughts of where we can shift things around. What, and I do take your point and find it very compelling about communities of interest, right? And like with like, what are those sort of magnets? And it's sort of question one, but also where's the growth? And we know South Edmonton's growing a lot. We were chatting earlier about Edmonton Manning. Kind of curious what the status and state of that growth is, and where is it happening, and what do you think belongs in what?
Do you want me to head to the map?
Sure, if you can. We'll send you the microphone so our friends at Hansard can grab your comment.
Yeah, definitely. My house didn't exist 6 years ago, and so the neighborhood has been built around that, and we're seeing that just in this corner up in here is where I live. The church that I serve at is 149. And so that is in here, right around here. And so definitely growth is coming up over here. And there's still, we walk around the neighborhood and there's houses being developed and growing. Single home dwellings as well as apartment buildings as well. Also the Gorman area around here is also scheduled to be developed, and then the Horse Hill community up in this direction is kind of up and coming as well. I don't know if I have any major suggestions as to kind of where that representation should be distributed, other than to kind of really to encourage keeping distinct communities together. One suggestion might be in terms of kind of like dividing it by major thoroughfares or roads, might be to kind of redistribute this section right there.
Again, I was playing with my map when you did that. Is that Manning Drive?
Yeah, so Manning kind of around to the Henday, and it kind of looks kind of funny, but
sorry, and everything west of Manning kind of belongs together, and everything east of Manning belongs together?
Maybe even just this kind of triangle might be a suggestion, and there would definitely be some community distinctions within those as well. So those are some of the things that we're observing as a church, and then just as someone who lives in the community.
Thank you.
Okay. Unless there's a burning question, we need to conserve time.
Absolutely.
Take no offense that we only let you answer one question, sir.
I don't, and I thank you for listening to the ramblings.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. They weren't rambling. Okay, that takes us to Stephen Smith.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to this commission. My name is Stephen Smith, and I am from West Edmonton, specifically the riding of Edmonton West Henday. If we can get that on the map there, I would appreciate it. I had originally intended to make this submission just as a text-based one, so if your takeaway is this could have been an email, I agree with you. I just ran out of time. And fortunately, that means that I won't take up too much of your time prior to lunch. So I wanted to, just a little background about myself. I grew up in Edmonton, West Henday, sort of in this West Edmonton area for my entire life. went away to school, came back, and now live here again. And I'm currently, seeking a house in this constituency as well. And I wanted to speak to the commission today to just reflect on one concern that I had about the redistricting, which is the possibility of breaking apart parts of cities. And I think it's very important to keep cities together as a piece of effective representation for the people who live in those constituencies. And I think that would also track with the way in which communities have developed here in this constituency. So what I mean by that is, having grown up in this neighborhood, I wanted to discuss what may look like a natural boundary, but is in fact not. And if I can go to the map, one of the previous ones. Is it working? All right. One of the previous folks did this, and it looked like fun. So here on the Anthony Henday Drive, this may look like it would be a natural place to put a boundary. I think one of the previous presenters suggested that as as using major and arterial roads. But I wanted to just emphasize that there is a substantial amount of community that sort of goes overlapping from these neighborhoods through to these neighborhoods, right? So over here in this West Henday area, you have local grocery stores, local community areas, gathering spaces, libraries, even a golf course that is consistently and repeatedly used by people who live in this neighborhood, which is where I am, but also kind of all the way north up in this area northwest of the constituency. So anticipating some of the questions, as I've seen you discussing so far, in terms of where the growth is in the next 7 years, it will be almost entirely in the northwest section of this constituency. And that is, as I've emphasized, somewhere that does have a deep tie to Edmonton. That is areas where you have new development that is occurring already, as well as new development that is scheduled to go. You can see that they've blotted out areas for both new homes and new homes that will include basement suites. So, yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that all of that is, in fact, a natural part of Edmonton, a place where there is quite a bit of overlap with folks further to the west. And I would strongly suggest to the commission that it continue to hold those places in the constituency and indeed connect them with Edmonton, rather than, I believe the next riding to the west would be Drayton Valley, Devon, and I don't think there would be a substantial community overlap among folks in Drayton Valley and folks in Edmonton. If that makes sense to everyone. The other thing that I wanted to ensure that the commission was discussing, I understand that you have the opportunity to put in 2 additional seats. I wanted to make at least a strong suggestion that one of those seats would be in Edmonton, because that is where we're seeing a substantial amount of growth, as you've heard both in this presentation and in previous ones. Questions, please.
Well, actually, sorry, go ahead.
I'll take one quick one. Thank you for your presentation, and I'm just looking at the population is over, as you know, and you're sitting next to Edmonton, Glenora. And you have expressed your opinion of respecting the city boundaries. Do you see that a natural cutoff in that area, which is the top of your riding? It would be the northeast portion of your riding to move it over into Glenora.
I think that would make quite a bit of sense. There's a large industrial area between the population centers. So in the southwest area of the constituency and in the northwest area of the constituency, that's where the bulk of the houses are. And then that industrial area makes sense as sort of a boundary. So if you were to cleave off the area sort of north of Yellowhead and connect that with Glenora, I think that would certainly make sense. And then that would allow, I would assume, for those west areas to continue to be in the same constituency that they are now.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
So, just one question. So you would say north of the Yellowhead, that would be the dividing line?
I think that's one reasonable suggestion.
And isn't your significant growth that you're talking about, isn't it really north and west of Anthony Henday?
So allow me to clarify. North and west of the Anthony Henday is where that significant growth would be. On the east side of the constituency, north of the Yellowhead, that is where I would merge with a different riding. Just as that was the one suggestion there, I wouldn't object to.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I have one question, and that we are charged with thinking about names. Do you like the name of your electoral district? Is it distinctive or directive enough?
Well, the current name is Edmonton West Henday. I like that as someone who lives adjacent to the Henday. It feels like home to me. But if you were to come up with an Edmonton West, and I don't know, that would, I think I've always described myself as from West Edmonton. So that seems reasonable to me.
Okay. I can't wrap my head around the fact that Calder, which is not west by anybody's stretch, is part of a riding called West Henday, and large part of your riding is not west of the Henday. I find it confusing personally.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, and having spoken to many people in that area, I think they also are sort of surprised to discover that they're in the same constituency as Lewis Estates and some of the other neighborhoods there.
Thank you. Okay. Great.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
I believe our last presenter now is Audrey Johnson McGillis. Good morning.
All right. Anyways, I appreciate giving me some time to give my suggestions, and it's been quite confusing for me because I don't usually sit around looking at maps and wondering about boundaries. That's not usually. I think about personal boundary space usually. When we talk about renaming, I've been hearing a lot of discussion here about how confusing it is to have these names with electoral districts. In the spirit of reconciliation, I suggest that these names be changed to Indigenous names. South of the border would be Blackfoot Nation. Historically, that is the nation that existed here long before Edmonton was Edmonton. North of the North Saskatchewan River is all Nihiwak, the Cree Nation. And I would suggest that names all be changed to that to accommodate the true history of Edmonton, Amaskitche, Westaigan, as it used to be called. I would love to see it go back to that name because that is the original name. We do, and a lot of people don't understand that history. I also don't think districts should be racially motivated. I don't think that anything should be put in place along the lines of where communities are built with just blacks living with blacks, whites living with whites, Chinese living with Chinese. We're supposed to be a multicultural city, multicultural province, multicultural Canada. That's what we spout all over the world, and as treaty holders, we agreed to that. So I just wrote a few notes and things I've heard people saying, and, that's the pride of Canada, is this multicultural expression. And so I think it's important that that continues, where people learn to immerse into the Canadian culture versus bringing other cultures here and expecting us all to be accommodating to other cultures. We as Indigenous people have accommodated many, many other cultures, and without any license and any consultation and no permission given, right? So I really think it's time that we sit at the table with some of these things, and people are not asking us what needs to be done. I asked to sit on the commission because I really believe there needs to be representation of Indigenous representation. I wasn't invited to sit on your commission. So I think we need to move forward in that area somewhat. We all know that every culture has its own beliefs and values. What is Canadian culture? That's been a big, huge question lately. And what is the culture of Alberta? I don't believe we're just oil-rig pigs. I don't believe that at all. I believe we're more than that. We used to be great for beef. We used to be great for wheat. We used to be great for other things, and well known for that throughout the world as an economy. I think that we need to get back to understanding that this multiculturalism, people need to immerse in schools. I work part-time at a school right now, and instead of just teaching the Indigenous students that I'm there supporting, I am inclusive of all the other nations that come, because I know some children are traumatized from other lands. So I want them to have a sense of belonging to Canada. So that I bring them into my teachings, into my classroom that I have every now and then, and I explain things to them, how things are done in Canada, which are different than their country. You know, we need to express that throughout the school systems. We need to express that throughout the electoral systems, and we need to not create this division. I know in India they have a concept of higher and lower. I can't remember what that's called off the top of my head. Class system? Caste system. I do believe if we continue this road of separatism, creating little small pots of communities that are separate from each other, we will create that here in Canada. And we need to not do that. You know, there is in our culture, there's no such thing. And I think Indigenous values and beliefs need to be taken into consideration in all of these talks and all of these meetings, because our values are quite inclusive. They are quite inclusive. We've had to learn the English language. We've had to learn Canadian values. We've had to learn non-Indigenous beliefs and ways of being. So if people want to be Canadian and want to live in Edmonton, Alberta, then they need to know these values as well. And I strongly recommend that you do not create according to race. You're going to hurt the children. They're not going to learn how to be productive in business world that is more inclusive. They're not going to learn how to be productive in high schools that will not be able to just be formed according to race. Universities are not according to race, so you're limiting. I know that personally as an Indigenous person, because we had to immerse to get education, and we've benefited from that. You see me here talking, I'm one of the benefits. So please take this all in consideration, and I ask that you please consider creating Indigenous names for electoral districts. And also, the other point, there was an electoral district that was put in place across the street from Enoch. And when the construction was taking place, they didn't do due diligence for research. And now there sits a graveyard that was once part of Enoch Reserve in the middle of a community. That shouldn't happen. There should be some research done on all these electoral places prior to anything being changed, so that there is there's nothing destroyed that has spiritual, historical significance for our people. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you very much. And can I zone in on your naming suggestion? Do you have a particular electoral district that should be renamed? If you said it, I missed it. Which?
Well, what I said was historically, a lot of people, when they do the Welcome to Treaty Territory 6, which we're on right now, they are inclusive of all the nations that live here presently.
Right.
They don't take in the historical accuracy, which is south of the border, Blackfoot, north of the border, Nehiyawak.
Okay, which border are you?
Pardon me, the river is the border. That's how we looked at the border.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
South of the river, Blackfoot. Gotcha. North of the river would be the Nehiyawak.
So south of the river, all Blackfoot name.
Yes.
Okay.
That would definitely demonstrate an act of reconciliation, but also demonstrate an act of true historical accuracy.
Can I ask you to do some homework? Because there's several ridings south of the river, there's several ridings north of the river.
You gonna pay me?
I'll pay you out of what I get paid from this?
Absolutely. You pay me, I'll do all the research you want me to do.
Okay.
I can do that. What did you want, though? You're not gonna have me forever. What kind of research are you looking for?
I didn't ask for research. I just asked for suggested names.
Oh, suggested names?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. I can give you that. I'm an elder in the community. I can do the ones for,
Yeah.
and I know I have friends who are south of
Because
the
naming
river.
is part of our task. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Good. Any other questions?
Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to pick up on your remark about the graveyard. Is that immediately east of Winterburn Road?
Yes.
Okay.
It's actually between Anthony Henday and the Winterburn Road.
Yeah.
And it's right in the middle of a community. And when the Indigenous people, and I went there, did ceremony before they broke ground for construction, because nobody did their due diligence for research. And the people that asked me to come and help the ceremony, they said, you know, our ancestors are buried here. How can they do this? I says, you need to address this before they even got a permit. But how do you address it if you don't know people are doing things? Like, you know, we're not accustomed to meeting people and discussing things. And I think there needs to be more of that, right? Because there's grounds of, like, I mean, even looking at the south side, we had the one beside just before the bridge.
Yeah.
Then they built that after everything was done. You know, so moving forward, we can start taking care of these things rather than having to have a battle or protest and rallies happening. There's a way of preventative measures, if you will, but also respectful measures, right?
Great.
Just to thank you so much for the genuinely appreciate and honor you coming and talking with us today. Thank you.
I truly appreciate you listening and not looking at me with incredulous views like soft looks or whatever. I appreciate that, you know. Makes me feel good, just like Yellow.
I just wanted to make the same comment as the rest of us up here, in that I really appreciate the fact that you came out today and shared with us part of your history, heritage, and culture. We haven't had a lot of input like that, and we've been seeking that input to no success. Not successful to date, so thank you.
I'm an elder of the community at large, right? And I've traveled throughout the land everywhere and did all kinds of things. I hold the pipe. You know, what they should have maybe asked me to do was be an elder who traveled and help be part of the committee meetings, because that makes it more comfortable for Indigenous people. Plus, I get the word out.
Yes.
Right? And then people are comfortable coming to talk, because then they know they can talk their way. There's a fear of doing things properly, like the one pastor coming, he was afraid. Well, multiply that 100 times. Indigenous people are just don't feel like they'll ever be heard.
I'll make note of your comments. Thank you.
Yeah, you can reach me anytime if you want me to come to other meetings and just be present. I'm willing to do that. I think our voices are important.
Please leave your information with Aaron, your contact information.
I will.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, that closes out our morning now. I think we'll adjourn and reconvene for 1 o'clock if we can get lunch in the meantime.